Alright, now we're ready for reassembly. The first thing you're going to want to do is put on your front, which is your digitizer LCD. The cables will slip through this hole right here. So what you're going to want to do is gently put those two cables through there. And there's tracks in the frame at the top that you want to line up with. One thing you want to make sure once you have this lined up in the tracks is that these cables they're both the same length. If this cable has a tendency to get folded, and if you start reassembling and it's folded, you're not going to be able to clip it onto the logic board. It's going to be too short. So make sure that these two cables are the same length. They may be a little bit off, but they should for the most part be exactly the same length. So what I'm doing now is just making sure that the frame lines up and it's going into the tracks. Sometimes on the sides it'll get stuck under the little washers. Just what I do is take a pry tool and I'll push the clip to the frame behind the washer, and then it should snap in nicely. So you can see this one is flush. So what we're going to do now is we're going to screw in and tighten the 6 screws with washers to hold the frame in place. And as a note, you never want, no screws when you're reassembling do you ever want to tighten really tight. You want them to be snug, but you don't want to strip them. So I normally just do them to where they're snug. If I ever have to take the phone apart again, I don't want to have to deal with pulling out stripped screws. So when they're snug, they're tight enough. And we've got one more. It's kind of hidden by that dot connector. Alright, and now we're going to replace the 4 screws in the corner. The hardest one to get in is this one up here in the top. So the easiest way to do that is to come at it from an angle. And this is how I do it. I come in from this way. And you can typically get it in with one shot that way. Alright, so that one's in, and we're going to replace the other 3. Okay, so we've replaced the 4 screws in each corner, and we've tightened the 6 washers. And at this point what you want to do is make sure not forget to put the speaker mesh in. I can't tell you how many times I've reassembled a phone completely and realized that I forgot to put the speaker mesh in. So by this point, make sure you have that in there. The next thing you're going to want to do is make sure that it's flush along the frame. So if you have any gaps or any openings, or you think you're going to be able to see light leak, unscrew these, reposition the front, and try again. So once that's good, the next thing that goes back in the device is your speaker assembly, which is this little guy that goes down here. And he just pretty much sits right in here. Nothing too complicated. We talked earlier about the little 4 clips right here. Maybe we didn't, but there are 4 little teeth that go below the frame here. I apply a little bit of pressure. You don't want to break these off, but they like to pop up, so push it down with your pry tool. The easiest way I found to do this is once you have those 4 little teeth underneath the frame, hold this piece down with one finger, and then with the other, put in the screw on the right hand side. You want to wait to put the left hand screw in until you've got your logic board in place. So screw that in. And now we're ready to put our logic board back in. The easiest way to do this, first of all, you're going to want to make sure your dot connector cable's out of the way. You're going to want to make sure your antenna cable's out of the way. Just bend it back a little bit without breaking it. Make sure these cables are pushed back. If you've replaced a digitizer LCD, these cables can be a little stiff. Just push them in the frame and kind of try to bend them to where you're going to have room to put the logic board back in. The easiest way to put your logic board in, make sure your little rubber piece is on there. Start at the top, and you've got this top notch up here that you want to line up with where your screw and your logic board shield is. So I typically push these cables back and position the top part and then put down the bottom. And I'll show you a real quick way to see if you've got your logic board positioned correctly once I get it completely lined up. Okay, so I think that's right. I think it's in there good, and I can double check myself, and this is a little cheat. Put in your SIM tray. If your SIM tray goes in easily, your logic board's in correctly. And this also will hold your logic board in place while you screw back in everything and snap down all your connectors. So next thing we're going to do is we can replace this screw down here, which is one of the ones you took out of the speaker assembly earlier. So we're going to put that screw back in. And however you decide to put these screws in or however you organize them is fine, as long as you remember which screws go where. So if you want to put them back in a different order than I do, that's fine too. So next I'm going to come up here and replace this screw. And remember, snug, not stripped tight. Next we're going to switch to our flathead screwdriver, and we're going to grab the little unicorn screw that goes up here in the top, and this guy sits right in here. Okay. Next thing I typically do is snap back down my little Wi-Fi antenna, which goes right here. This guy is kind of annoying to put back in at first, so what I typically do is, if you need to guide it a little bit, I know it's really hard to see, it's just a little round connector, use your pry tool to kind of guide it, and then snap it down with your finger. That's typically what I do. Some of them snap in a little bit quicker than others. Just depends on how you bent the cable. You've got to bend it back a little bit. Okay, so we've got our Wi-Fi antenna plugged back in. Now you can reconnect this dot connector cable and just kind of line it up. Snap it down. You should hear it. It gives a little bit of feedback, and then push down the adhesive that holds the rest down. Then we're going to come back up here and we're going to reinsert our camera, which just kind of sits in there. And then we're going to snap back down this cable. And then what I typically do with this is skip this cable and go to the third one and put that one down first, just because it's a little bit, this one's a little tougher, it's thicker, so sometimes this one will keep popping up if you don't fold this one down first. Then come back and grab your other one. Then come over here and put down these 3 cables. And all these should snap in relatively easily. Okay, so we've got all our cables snapped down. Now we can replace our vibrator assembly. Vibrator assembly is really not connected to anything else, so what order you take this out in is no matter. If you're replacing a speaker assembly, you don't even really have to remove it. If you're doing a screen replacement, you will need to remove it to get to that back screw, or if you're fixing a home button. So pretty much the only time this needs to come out is if you're performing a repair that requires you to take off the screen. And again, these 2 screws are different sizes. The longer screw goes to the left and the shorter screw goes to the right. So, got our vibrator assembly back in. And now what we're going to do is we're going to replace the shield that covers the connectors on the logic board. So all you do to do this is remember that notch we talked about at the beginning. Just put that back into place. And the rest of that should just fall right into place. And now we're going to replace the 5 screws that hold the shield down. Okay, so we're almost done with reassembly. We replaced the 5 screws that hold down the logic board shield that covers the there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 screws. They're all different sizes, so hopefully you kept those separate when you disassembled. Now we're going to replace the shield that covers the dot connector cable. So that's this little guy. And we're going to put him right there. And grab our screwdriver. These 2 screws were different sizes as well. The smaller one goes on the left, the larger one goes on the right. Okay, so that guy's going in sideways. So you do want to make sure these go in straight. That's why typically I won't tighten them until I've gotten both of them centered, because sometimes they'll want to go in at an angle. So, alright, those guys are in there. And now all we really have left to do is put our battery on and then put our back plate on. So, you remember this little guy, a little Wi-Fi grounding clip? Easiest way to do this, I've found, is you've got a section right in here where you've got your screw hole. This will only seat in here one way properly. So what I've found to be the easiest is to hold this guy down with your finger, and then with your other hand take your battery, line up that clip, and snap it right down, and that'll hold down that clip. Sit your battery in there, push it down so the adhesive will hold it in. We've got 1 screw left that holds in the battery. Okay, so we've got our battery held down, we've got the screw replaced. Now we're just going to need to put our back on, which just seats right in there. And instead of sliding it up, you slide it down. And then once that's on, all you need to do is replace your 2 dot connector screws, and obviously power on your phone to make sure it works, and you're done.